Hello and welcome to the Extraordinary Retirement Podcast with your hosts, Gregg Indovina and Nate Yeomans. I'm Wendy McConnell. So, how are we feeling today, Nate and Greg?
We feel great.
Good. Good topic today.
Excited to be here.
Yeah, speaking of which, the topic is why is nobody taught about finances in school? Like, really, shouldn't that be like the number one thing we should learn?
When I was in high school, I was taught to write a check.
Balance a checkbook.
Not even that. It was just how to write a check. I remember you had to draw the line with two little X's and then
I must have been in the advanced class because they actually had me balance the checkbook. So
yeah.
Well, aren't you?
Yeah. It's frightening. My daughter is going to be graduating college in a year, and all this school and all this education, she knows nothing about finance. I mean, nothing that I haven't taught her. The system has failed people. Absolutely. So that's what we'll be talking about, Wendy.
Sounds good. So, what is it that people need to know most of all when it comes to a financial education?
it's a good question. I think, we have to think about where do you start, right? Because there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of so-called pundits and experts that have an opinion. But we always have to ask the question of what do those individuals know about your personal situation to have an opinion on it. Yeah. And so the big thing is that when you've got a lot of information out there, and I'm not saying all of it's bad, it's just how do you filter out the noise? How do you find the information that is pertinent to you and determine how does that impact your financial life so that you can kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together from that perspective. So you need a process to be able to get that done.
Yeah, imagine getting on Google and typing in financial advice for a retiree. My goodness, where do you start? Where would you even begin to start, and who would you trust? So it's a frightening idea for a lot of people to begin to try to figure out their financial life, especially if they're in their 50s or 60s or even older. So because the reality is that most people, their entire financial education revolves around what we both experienced in high school many moons ago, right? This is a checkbook. Here's how you balance your checkbook. And then the other main piece of education is you get a job and you're forced to sign up for a 401k, and the HR department comes in and does a 45-minute overview of the 401k, and here are your selections, and you make your select. That is the extent of most people's financial education. And then you're approaching retirement where, Nate, how many chances do you get to get that right?
We get one shot.
You get one shot, and it's got to be terrifying for people.
Yeah. So the problem really to boil that down is that we don't have a system to educate us and prepare us from a financial perspective to take on life, let alone retirement. And there's a lot of noise. And most of the time, what we find is most people don't have a process to go through to filter out the noise, to get all the important information that they need to know about their retirement so that they can make good decisions for themselves. And so that's where things break down, is that we don't have that ability to do that as individuals because the system doesn't do it for us. And so that leads to a situation to where somebody essentially is flying blind or going throughout life or towards retirement or in retirement very confused. And so we have to have a way to cut to the chase and give them the information they're looking for.
If you could tell us, what are some of the most important things when it comes to thinking about retirement, and what type of information is probably, the most important to focus on?
I would say that retirement, the financial phase of retirement is completely unlike anything that you've experienced up to that point. Everything changes as you approach retirement. You're no longer in what we call the accumulation phase of your life, which is fairly straightforward. There are a multitude of risks that you have to deal with and have plans for. The consequences of getting it wrong as you approach or you are in retirement are devastating. And so it's a whole new world once you approach retirement. Nate?
Yeah. So if we break that down further, is that when you're young and in your 30s, 40s, et cetera, you really, your money has one job, and that is to grow, right? You want to put that money away, you want to save it, and you want to grow. It's about as simple as that. But as you're getting closer to retirement, if you're 5 or 10 years from retirement, you enter into what we call the retirement risk zone, right? And one of the big things you're running out of at that time in your life is time, right? So if you're getting close to saving the most amount of money you've ever saved in your life, which is the day that you want to retire, right? And now all of a sudden, the markets, which are out of your control, decide to have a pretty tough year, maybe like last year or something like that. Now you don't have as much time to recover from those losses like you did in your 30s and 40s. And so as you enter that retirement risk zone, we have to start thinking about different strategies and different approaches to get you to the top of the mountain, but without taking big falls backwards. But like Greg said, the minute you retire, everything you know about investing changes.
Yeah.
And here's why. We're now asking your money to do something for you that it's never, ever had to do. And that is to pay you. Mm-hmm. All your life, your money's job has been more about growing, not putting money in your pocket, right? So you enter into the income phase of life, and now we're asking your money to take on some stress that it is not used to. And that looks very different than what you've been doing in the accumulation phase of your life. And most people don't know how to make that transition.
Does that
so Wendy, our solution to this problem is we teach a comprehensive retirement class, and we do it as a public service, but it's an opportunity for us to meet people out in the community as well. And it's very specific. It cuts through all the noise, the million or so responses you get from Google on how to retire successfully. It cuts through the noise, and it identifies a lot of the areas that are very, very important. So maybe we can talk about that class right now.
Sounds good. I would like to hear all about it.
Nate, we've been doing it for how many years now? 7 or maybe 8?
We're going on 7, 8 years now. And
all around Denver and various different academic
local
settings.
Universities and other settings. And we've had a lot of fun with it. We've developed the curriculum over that period of time and used a lot of feedback from previous attendees to help us really dial that class in. But to break it down fairly simply is that we do the class in 2 nights. So it's a 2-night class. It's 2 hours each night. So it's we at one point, if we taught 4 hours, I think it becomes information overload in one night. So we break it up into 2 nights, and we have a workbook that is designed for you to follow along and create an action item list for yourself so that you can make sure that you're taking notes and writing down things that are going to apply to in your financial plan. And so it is a comprehensive course that's really designed to cover everything you need to know from A to Z when it comes to retirement. So maybe we can give a little bit of a highlight of what some of those topics look like.
Yeah, the first topic is retirement then and now. And I always tell the story of my grandpa Eddie, and how he was counting the days down to retirement, and just around. And he had the traditional, he worked for the city of Pittsburgh, and when he retired, he was done. There was no part-time work. There was no phasing into retirement, and he got his pension, which between his pension and his Social Security, that covered his entire lifestyle. Any savings that he had was just extra for trips and things like that. Today, it's very, very different. Today people have multiple jobs, multiple careers, and most people don't have pensions if they've worked in the private sector. And so it's really now on the retiree to fund their own retirement to a large extent. And that's a very, very different world than it was back for my grandpa. So we talk about that. The next thing, Nate, you always like to go through these financial stages of life and the differences and the importance of understanding where you are and what the risks are in those different phases. So why don't you walk through that quickly?
Yeah, you bet. The analogy that we like to use is that we're climbing your financial Mount Everest, right? And as you're climbing along that journey, things need to change. As climbers climb Mount Everest, as they ascend the mountain, elements change. As they get closer and closer to the summit, elements change. It becomes more treacherous. So just like I explained to you earlier, Wendy, of as we go into those stages from the accumulation stage to the retirement risk zone, as you're climbing the mountain, you don't want to take a big fall backwards. So these climbers are climbing with ropes and suspenders, things that can catch them if they make a fall as they get closer and closer to the summit. But here's the thing. Do more people die on the way up the mountain or on the way down when climbing Mount Everest?
I think it's more treacherous on the way down, isn't it?
It's actually more treacherous on the way down.
Yeah, if
In
you've ever walked
particular,
down a big hill, you know that. You speed up,
right.
you get
You've been exposed to the elements a lot longer, which, time means that more things can happen. But as you start that journey down, it can become more treacherous. And you know what? Retirement's not that different.
Yeah.
In particular, your first 10 years of retirement are the most critical. I read a statistic one time that said 80% of your success in retirement will be determined in the first 10 years, 50% in the first 5. And so what that tells us is that we've got to get off to a good start in retirement. And so what we go through in the class, we talk about practical solutions, things that you can do to make sure that you get off to a good start, because there's certain things that you have control of, but there's also certain things you don't. Do we have any control what the market's going to do tomorrow or the day after you retire? The
Never.
markets are going to do what the markets are going to do, but a good financial plan is designed knowing that we have the ability to make sure that our clients get off to a good start. And that's what we teach in our class of how do you take that tool and make sure that you don't get off to a bad start.
Is it more than just being a little more conservative with your investments, or is that basically the idea behind it? Because I think that's what most people think.
It's a great question. Investments are only one piece to the puzzle. And that's the piece that a lot of people miss, and they stop right there of, I just get more conservative in my investments. So let's start with something as simple as Social Security. So we walk through the Social Security system and we walk through strategies and talk about how do we maximize Social Security in retirement, or is it even appropriate to maximize Social Security in retirement? We walk through different scenarios from spousal benefit planning to the event that something happens to a spouse and one spouse passes away. What happens in that scenario? So we want to start with what's the foundation to the retirement. And a lot of times that's the guaranteed sources of income that you have. Social Security being one of those. It's one of those checks that you just get every single month. It creates a foundation at some level. Now, for most people, it's not enough to live off of. And if you don't have another pension or something like that to supplement your Social Security, then we have to identify, the fact that your investments are going to have to do some of the rest of the heavy lifting, if you will. And so, we break down Social Security. We make sure that people get that piece right. But then Greg talks about investments. And do you want to go into reducing market losses and things that we need to be thinking about from an investment perspective, Greg, in retirement?
Yeah, a good portion of our class is on understanding retirement risks, things that really weren't an issue as you were in that accumulation phase. Market losses is certainly a big one. When you're younger, having market losses can actually be to your benefit, because every 2 weeks, money's going into your 401k or IRA, and you're being able to take advantage of lower prices. The exact opposite happens with market losses when you're taking distribution. So all of a sudden that 15% loss becomes maybe a 20% loss because of the distributions that you're taking. So those are, that market losses are one part of market risk. There's also the risk of interest rates. We know that interest rates have been very, very low up until here recently. And how does a retiree create guaranteed income when the banks aren't paying anything? right? And then what if interest rates continue to go up? The value of bonds, and Wendy, you were alluding to, maybe you just get more conservative. Well, for most people, being conservative means adding more bonds. Well, how did that work in 2022 when interest rates were going up, up, and up, and the value of bonds went down? And so there's all kinds of market-based risks that are very, very different than when you were in the accumulation phase. There's also the second category of risks that we deal with are what we call spending shocks. And the number one spending shock is actually the value of the dollars that you've saved buying less and less over time. And if you don't know what I'm referring to, that's inflation, right? So if you have an $80,000 a year required spending for year one in retirement, well, year two, in order to have that same lifestyle and buy the goods and services that you bought in year one, you're going to have to add an inflation number to that. Now, historically, it's in the mid 2% range. What if it's not over the next 30 years of your life? What if it's 3 or 4%, right? That's essentially a reduction in income in the future of your plan. And so we help people understand the compounding negative effect of inflation over a 30 to 40 year retirement.
So is there something we can do to, hold that at bay? Something we can do to make up for it, so to speak?
Yeah. And once again, this goes back to your comment, Wendy, about getting more conservative as you get closer to retirement. In general, that makes sense. However, one of the primary ways to keep up with inflation is having a higher allocation to stocks, right? Because stocks tend to go up when there's more money flooded into the financial system, causing a rise in prices. It also causes a rise in assets, such as your home and such as the stock market. So that's an important thing to understand when it comes to inflation. But other spending risks, Nate, why don't you talk about healthcare and long-term care, which is a spending shock that we need to account for?
So healthcare is a very delicate one. And at the end of the day, I don't know what healthcare need people are going to have in retirement, but I do know they're going to have to pay for it. Yeah. And so we have to factor in healthcare separately in a retirement plan than their normal goods and services that they're spending money on. And the reason is that healthcare inflation is very different than normal goods and services. Healthcare goes up at a much higher pace. And so we need to separate those two so that you have confidence to know that you've got, built into your financial plan the amount of money you need to buy your normal daily goods and services, things to, keep your life going and moving forward. But we also have to have healthcare in there, because I don't know what you're going to need in life, but we're going to have to pay for the premiums, and those things do go up over time. And so we want to build that in. That is separate, though, from long-term care. Long-term care is a different topic. That is more something that has to be dealt with towards the end of a financial plan generally. And at the end of the day, a lot of people don't have a plan for long-term care. But really they do. No plan is a plan. No plan means that everything you own is your long-term care plan. So in class, what we do is we actually have a dedicated section to just long-term care. And we talk about what are the traditional approaches to long-term care? What are the pros and cons? Why, if somebody has one of those plans today, maybe they should highly think about keeping that plan, because a lot of times you can't get those same plans anymore. But for those that don't, is there a more modern approach to long-term care planning? Is there an approach that has more pros and less cons today that could be a better situation for those individuals? So we go through all of those things so that at the end of the day, what we want everybody to know is they got to check the box. They have to check the box that they have a long-term care plan. And if it is, they decide not to utilize a insurance product or something like that, they're essentially deciding to self-insure their long-term care plan. That's perfectly fine as long as they know that that's their strategy moving forward.
It's a
And
very
if you don't have a separate account for that, then it's going to come out of your regular account and affect your lifestyle moving forward.
So we've
yeah,
unpacked a lot, and that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg of the class that we've taught so far. But you know what else we have to talk about? Taxes.
Oh boy.
Are taxes a big deal in retirement? Absolutely. And why is that? Taxes are a big deal in retirement because most people save their money for retirement in an environment that they've never paid tax on yet. And they've got to understand
401ks and IRAs and
those types of vehicles. That's exactly right. And so what we've got to remember is you've got a partner in that equation, and that partner is Uncle Sam. And so your partner at some point in time wants to know that they're going to get paid. And so understanding the impact that you have, that taxes have on your retirement plan becomes incredibly important. So we want to walk through how taxes impact your retirement plan. But here's the other thing. For most people, they probably have more control over their tax situation in retirement than any other time in their life.
Yep.
And so getting these pieces right and understanding the proper order to spend your retirement assets down to be efficient with taxes where you can, it becomes a very, very critical thing. And so
Nate,
once
that arrangement that you have with the government is an open-ended agreement where the government can change the rules at any time.
That's exactly right. And so that's also why we want to talk about that. Yeah, while taxes give us a lot of heartburn and there's things that we need to be concerned about, at the end of the day, historically, we're in relatively low tax brackets today, but we have to understand what happens if taxes go up. Is it likely that taxes will go up? Everybody will have an opinion of their own, but there are unique opportunities that can be taken advantage of today through what we call the Roth conversion. Today, there's a really good opportunity until 2026 when the current income tax laws change for an individual to convert money out of their traditional IRA, pay tax on it, but put it into their Roth IRA, which will be forever tax-free. And so we walk through those steps and what that looks like for somebody that's trying to understand, how do I diffuse this tax time bomb I've got on my hands? I did all the right things. I saved money where they told me to save money. I did a really good job of it. And now all of a sudden you're telling me I'm going to be penalized because I'm going to be paying all these taxes. Can I do anything about it? And so we actually walk through that process and what that looks like as well.
And for the people that don't think that taxes are likely to be higher in the future, I spend probably 15 minutes going through the fiscal case of, looking at the federal government's fiscal situation. And at the end, everyone always nods their head and say, yep, taxes are going up.
Taxes are going up.
They don't go down.
And think about the impact. Think about the impact of higher taxes. If you're counting on taking out your money at 15% for the rest of your life through these IRAs and 401ks, and all of a sudden that doubles to 30%, what does that do to your income down the road?
Right.
It's a huge problem.
It's a huge problem. And then that translates into estate planning, right? And we want to spend time in class talking about estate planning. And in particular, what happens to those assets that you've never paid tax on? Somebody's going to have to pay tax on them, right? And so understanding the impact of inherited IRAs beyond the spouse, what that looks like. But then we want to talk about basic estate planning from the perspective of what are the critical things that we think everybody should have in place? What are those items that we think that you should be consulting with an attorney about that specializes in estate planning to make sure that you have the basics? Okay. If we're in a situation with a higher net worth individual that maybe needs advanced estate planning, that's a whole nother topic. But for most people, standard estate planning is essential, and having the proper professional to work with to get that done via an attorney is really important. So we walk through those steps and give them a checklist that they need to take to an attorney to make sure that they're having that conversation.
Yeah. And Wendy, this class is designed for, well, there's three types of people that we run into. People that are the do-it-yourselfers, and they got a pretty good handle on things, and they come to class and they get some good insights, they get some advice, and they go on their way and they're perfectly fine. There are some people that have a plan in place, but they just want to make sure that get a professional opinion that the stuff that's taught in the class is in line with what they think. And there's other people that come out of the class and say, boy, this, I need some help. So those are the three types of people that tend to come to our class, and the outcomes are, at a minimum, they get an education that is very specific to their phase of life that they have never received before. And we cut through all the noise and we just shoot straight with people. It helps them identify issues. A lot of times people in the class will keep a list of, oh, this is an issue that I need to take care of. And what about this piece? And I don't have this taken care of. And what about inflation? That's good. And then they also get a sense as to what a financial plan looks like when it's complete. How do you put it all together? All right. How do you put it all together? Get a probability of success of, are you on track? What are the potential stresses that could cause the plan to go off track? If it goes off track, what are some of the things that you can do to get it back on track? Those are all the things that people learn. And yeah, Nate, in all the years we've been doing this, I don't think we've ever really had a negative review, have we?
Never had a negative review. And it's just something that we feel great about, that we're giving back in a way that honestly should be done way earlier in life. But like we said earlier, you get one shot to get this right. And most people spend more time planning a vacation than they do on their retirement education. And so this is an opportunity to spend 4 hours with professionals that have been doing this for a very, very long time in a non-sales environment to just learn. And we love to teach. It is something that we really enjoy.
So guys, if somebody has more questions or if they want to know more about the class, how do they get in touch with you?
Great question. So they can go to designwealthadvisors.com, and we have a list of all of our classes on there, and you can RSVP, or you can call our office at 720-833-7676 and inquire about our next classes coming up this fall. We start in August, and they can inquire there and RSVP to a class that fits them.
Okay. Well, thank you, Nate. Thank you, Greg. We've learned so much today.
We enjoyed it.
All right.
Thank you, Wendy.
And thank you for joining us today. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with your friends. Until next time, I'm Wendy McConnell.